I always stated next year I'll go get my high school diploma. And I kept saying it for years.
Growing up, I was under the impression that getting a GED was, a mark of failure.
I don't believe in lost causes. I believe that everyone has the potential to move above where they're at in life.
You never know what you can do, what you can accomplish.
Impossible is only impossible if you don't try.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
There are now more than a dozen other nations that have higher high school graduation rates than the United States. The problem is that we don't really know what the cost to America is of failing to educate large numbers of students, but it's really risky.
Individually, the data is just overwhelming that education is correlated with access to better jobs and higher earnings, higher income, lower unemployment rates, happiness, more health, higher marriages. So, education is our preparation for adulthood.
By the time I was in 8th grade, I had just witnessed a lot of very negative things in my household, just a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of issues with my family. I ended up deciding to drop out of school for the first time. And that first time that I dropped out, I went looking for a job and found a job as a gardener pushing lawnmowers.
I dropped out of high school in the second semester of the 10th grade and thought that was a cool thing to do. As a young man growing up in the housing projects, full of poverty, hopelessness, and despair, what I saw primarily were street guys and street folks, and who were kind of isolated from mainstream society. And I didn't have the ambition of being a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or school teacher of any profession, because that's not what I saw.
The average age of the adult that we're serving is 31. These are individuals who are young enough to get their high school credential and get additional skills and go into the workforce and contribute to society in a very meaningful way.
There are 2 million jobs today that are begging. They're going begging. These are jobs that are open, that people can fill, but aren't being filled because we don't have a skilled workforce. That's a drag on the economy. When people don't have the jobs to fill, they're not earning paychecks, they're not shopping, they're not going to restaurants, they're not buying homes, they're not doing all of the other things that fuel economic growth.
We need to find ways to address the needs of people from every segment of the population, because their children are going to be folks we need to rely on too. When my generation is retired, and many in my generation have not saved enough for retirement, are going to be relying on the public sector. We need as many productive citizens paying taxes as we can get, and not more young people who are also relying on public assistance. This is a fundamental turning point almost for the society with regard to whether we are going to have the productivity that we're going to need to support the population mix that we're going to have over the next 25, 50, 75 years.
I worked every day possible, as many jobs as I could possibly work, because I was trying to provide for a family. I was a young man, and it was real hard at the time. I was a great athlete. I was also a great student. I I've had straight A's my entire time in school. It was just outside noise that prevented me from succeeding.
I went to the second grade because my parents were, well, they signed us up to home educate, but we were never actually home educated. I was just getting any job I could get that would hire people that didn't have a high school or equivalency diploma. I was working 3 jobs because I had to be able to survive. I had apartment rent, I had a car payment, all of my utilities, just daily living expenses. 3 jobs is what I had to work to basically survive.
Wages at the low end of the distribution in the United States have really gone down in real terms. So the economic disadvantage of not finishing high school has actually grown in the last 20 or 30 years, and it's quite sizable. I mean, some estimates put it at roughly $500,000 over their lifetime.
Over time, I became employed. And I'm a young mother, I have a child, I needed security. So I took a job. And then you didn't have to worry about having a high school diploma. No one asked you. They needed a position filled. And you qualified, you had the job. So basically, long story short, that's how it's always been for me for years.
Economically, high school dropouts are more than, on average, twice as likely not to have a job. What does that mean for unemployment checks, subsidized housing, the healthcare system? Half of the incarcerated population is thought to be a high school dropout. When you offer them educational classes, they are way more likely not to commit a crime again, 40% less likely to commit a crime again. That's unbelievable when you look at the soaring costs of incarceration in the US.
When you're behind those doors, you have time to think about all the wrongs that you've done and what can you do to change, And you come up with the answer, am I gonna do the same thing when I get out, what is it gonna take? And I mean, you need that opportunity. You need someone to come in and help you try to get back within society and, do what's right.
And there were all these different things, right? And then I started thinking, you know what? The most important cost of all is the cost of what might have been, and that can't be measured. How do you measure what someone could have been had they lived up to their potential, right? It's all these things that are just out of reach. It's a business not started, a song not written, a bedtime story never read. And to me, that was heartbreaking, that it was there. It could have been. It just wasn't.
My name is Kelly Blair Hart, and because of who we are, my husband and I, and because we're so into education and the importance of education, I have a 6-year-old that wants to be a science teacher at 6, and I think that's amazing because, I remember at 6 and what my life was like at that point, and it wasn't, positive. I was born here in Washington, D.C. I have a twin brother. We have been separated from our natural mom since about age 2. It was a difficult life growing up. My father was an alcoholic, and there were times when we were homeless, and just couldn't seem to get stability within our lives. One of the first memories I have about schooling, actually, was a school in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I remember being homeless at the time and sleeping on a park bench that was like a couple blocks away from the school. And I remember the embarrassment of what if, one of my fellow classmates had walked past that. So when I think about that in terms of education, it wasn't there. It wasn't a priority on my list. I would say it was more of survival mode. What I dreamt about was where our next meal was coming. I had been suspended for multiple reasons, and I remember they told me, it was after one huge fight that I had, that this was going to be the one that was most likely going to expel me from school. And I do remember being in front of the school board and them asking you why you're not like everybody else. That I was a danger in their school system, and I couldn't be there. And I remember feeling, this is not me. But I had no way to express it. And if I could, would anybody believe it? There were so many times I just wanted to say, this is not me, and I know I can be regular. I know I can do this. And so I was sent to alternative education. And that didn't last too long either. I got sent out of there. And from there, I went to Job Corps. When I was at the Job Corps Center, I had the roof over my head. I had, food. I didn't have to worry about that. And then that was the time where I was able to think past day-to-day living and surviving. That program allowed you to take the GED test one part at a time. And so I remember focusing on just the reading, focusing on just the writing, and that's when I found out that I have a skill for writing. And so I began writing stories while being at Job Corps with a teacher that helped me. That was the first time where I felt important. Important in the aspects of education. For the first time, a teacher, was telling me that I had something special going on. And I latched onto that. And so I began employment at the local retail store. And I remember one day, one of my coworkers, I will never forget her name, Carla, and she noticed the ability for drawing that I have. And she said to me, "You should go over to the community college and take an art class." And I remember my exact remarks to her was, "No, thank you. Education and I don't get along, and that's not what I want to do." And I said, "Carla, I didn't make it through high school. I have a GED. There's no way I'm going to take a course at a community college, even if it is just art." And I refused. She picked me up for work because I wasn't driving. Instead of going to work, she took me straight to the registration for Northern Virginia Community College and paid for that first art class and took it with me, just so I wouldn't be alone with it. And that's how I began my community college career. Remember, you have to stack 5 liquids in here. When I started teaching alternative education, I realized I had something here that could motivate a lot more students than I thought. In order to grab those students, I began talking and telling them about myself. And that motivated them. And I realized I have something here, that would capture them. You want to try to pour the green yourself? They automatically assumed that I had everything and always had everything and that, my life was just perfect. That shocked me. But then I realized they have no idea what I've been through. They have no idea that, yeah, I know what it's like to be hungry. Yes, I know what it's like to have an alcoholic parent. Yes, I know what it's like to be living on food stamps. And yes, I know what it's like to have to go to a church to get your next meal. And I just blurted it all out, standing in front of that class for the first time, and you could see the mouths hitting the floor. And my students just were amazed at the fact that I had come from that background to where I am. I can do this, Miss Hart. You don't like me? I got it. Look at that. You got it? What happened? My face. Look how beautiful that is. My hands. I should have put more blue. You still can.
Can I get my bottle? My nuzzled their bellies with his nose and...
Katrina, my daughter, her life will be completely different than mine. And I feel that she will never know how it feels to struggle or to be homeless. And she knows that she is loved and supported. And every night I tell her, that I love her and that I'm here. Screaming. Sometimes Katrina shrieks very loudly. About 15 minutes, okay? And then you need to breathe a little bit, okay? So she will never know what it feels like to be hungry. She will never know what it feels like to think that you are so different that you're not cared about. My daughter will always know who her mother is.
Are you laying down?
I don't know, it's tired. All right, so.
It's for books.
I don't believe in lost causes. I believe that everyone has the potential to move above where they're at in life. Some of us, we just get started so far behind in life that it can take a lifetime for us to just have that turning point to transform our lives.
When I first started going to the adult center, I was embarrassed. I was at the age of 49 years old, no high school diploma. Everybody knew what you were there for.
It's very sad, but a lot of folks didn't understand why they didn't learn. So instead of trying to figure that out, they put it on themselves. Well, I'm stupid, or I'm ignorant, or I can't learn. In these books, looks like it's going to work for your team. Some of our folks have had dyslexia. Some folks have processing problems that were never diagnosed, and because they left school because they felt like they couldn't learn. Small numbers before we move into breaking down numbers.
It's sometimes an uphill battle. It's not as easy as saying, I believe in you, right? It's changing what they've believed all their lives about themselves.
And that was one of our resources we were going to use.
I was petrified about coming back to school. I had been out of school for so long that I felt I wouldn't do well. And by me only having been to high school where, kids are very cruel, and if you don't do well in high school, kids come down on you.
So when we write, it has to be complete. And everything we need to know should be right here.
My experience coming back to school was kind of shaky because of prior experience with school. I was a failure at it. With the staff at Youth Build, they just showed me that if you stay persistent, stay on it, we're here to help you, that you can achieve what you set out to achieve with your education.
Persistence is, I believe I would be nowhere without persistence. I would still be sitting at home in front of the telly on the couch, doing nothing with myself. But persistence has driven me to want more, to keep going. It's my fuel.
I was devoted. I was up from midnight to 1, 2 o'clock. It's like I had to have this done by the next morning for Amy to check to make sure I was doing good on it. That was my life till I got my GED. So today, I'm proud to say I got my GED at 49. I encourage anybody that doesn't have it, at whatever age, to go. It was kind of like a kid with a new toy when I got it.
I felt like if I accomplished to get my GED, I can do anything in the world. And it's almost as if I felt like Superman given his powers. When I got my GED, it was just a marvelous day for me, because I knew from that point on I could only achieve greater things.
It is a second chance for me. It's a chance of a lifetime. I waited many, many years. Won't say how many, but I waited many, many years for this opportunity to come, and I really feel good about it.
It's real easy to get discouraged or to let other things get in the way, but everyone that we have seen who have achieved it has never regretted it. They've always they carry themselves a little bit stronger and a little bit higher, and it just opens every door in the world for college or for work. It's just a key that unlocks the biggest door that you'll ever walk through.
What are your numbers like today?
We have 33 kids today.
Okay, how many you got in court?
One out so far. We had big days.
My name is Hassan Davis. I live in Berea, Kentucky. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Good. How y'all doing today? Young people are a real special focus of mine. The work that I have done my whole adult life is working with high-risk youth. And so what I want you to understand is that this is your opportunity to figure out how you move forward, or you give us permission to keep holding you back, because we're good at that, right? I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I started in a pretty stable family that by the time I was 6, started to disintegrate. My sister and I walked in on my father, straddled my mom on the couch, choking her, his hands around her neck, and things fell apart. Police came and took him away in handcuffs. Shortly after that, they separated, then divorced. My mother worked several jobs, and we began to go on and off the food stamp rolls, and so life got a bit of a challenge then. In my early life, was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia fairly young, In kindergarten, they started locking me in the code room because I was one of those kids that was never going to be anybody. And I bounced around from school to school, had 5 different elementary school over my elementary career. We moved from St. Louis to Atlanta after my 3rd grade year. And after an arrest at 11 years old and moving further into delinquency, my mother enrolled me in an alternative school. And it was a very unique school. There were kids like me who struggled and had lots of challenges, and then there were gifted and talented kids who struggled and had lots of challenges because they weren't being challenged enough in other schools too. But the administrator of this school was the most unique piece, Dr. Lorraine Wilson. She called me to her office one day, and it was one of those moments for me that was kind of usual. You know, you come to the office and you get the, I'm just waiting for you to screw up so I can kick you out of here. And I'm always like, well, we could probably get that done by lunchtime and get everybody back on schedule because I know the routine. So I sat there and she said, you know, I know who you are. And I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do is prove me wrong. And I sat there for a second. So I said, you know I'm Hassan, right? And she said, I know who you are, Hassan, and I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do is make me a fool for believing such a thing. And for the first time in my educational career, someone told me that I was already great and dared me to give up great for something less than that. My mother did the same thing when she picked me up from the police station at 11 and told me that if I could just see what she saw, then I would know. And so the two of them together kind of gave me this counter image of myself as a backdrop to whatever the rest of the world was giving me, as a monster, as a thug, as stupid, as useless, as all of these labels that had kind of built up. Full disclosure, I got expelled from that school. But because Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mother, Alice Lovelace, continued to paint this really broad vision of who I could be and dared me to reach for it. After I got expelled, I said, you know, I'm gonna get my GED. And then after I got my GED, I said, you know what? I can do college. You know, with a 1.67 GPA and ADHD and dyslexia and expulsion from alternative school. But Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mama, Alice Lovelace, said that I could do it. And so who am I to turn down that kind of courage? And so it gave me the courage to seek out a place called Berea College here in Kentucky. I got accepted into Berea and decided that it was time to try something different. Came to Kentucky sight unseen. I'd never been here, never been to a small town like that. And so all of my greatest fears were riding with me. I spent my whole first year feeling like an imposter, feeling like eventually somebody was going to notice that I wasn't supposed to be there and call the college police and report me. You know, I was in remedial English and math the entire first year of college. I felt like I was completely unprepared, but I was there. Truth is, and I like to be very honest, I got expelled from Berea twice. That's a really difficult thing sometimes, I think, for young people. But for me, there wasn't a plan B. There was not a go back home and hit the streets, and because I knew what the outcome would be from that. You know, and truth is, my brothers Derek and Sean are both doing life sentences now. And as often as I've thought about how good it would have been for me to be there, maybe I could have changed it, the reality is, more likely than not, I would be with them, or I would be dead like my 5 cousins. And I went back to Berea and actually graduated from Berea after my 3rd time back. And when I graduated, I was president of the student body. I was homecoming king. I was voted unanimously by the vice presidents to go to DC and lobby Congress for work-study college funding. And as I stood up at graduation to give the opening welcome and prayer, my mother was walking down the aisle of the auditorium to take her seat. And in that moment, I finally saw the man she'd been looking at since she picked me up from the police station, where she told me that I was great and that if I could finally see that, then I would finally be able to own it. We have to work at it. I got expelled from every school I ever attended, diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, grew up on food stamps and the whole 9 yards. And there are lots of folks who say, Hassan, well, you should probably leave that stuff out about the GED and about the arrest and about the being expelled because, nobody would ever know that about you and you're so successful now and it just really, it creates questions. And I'm like, well, it should, and the question that I hope it creates is, if these are things that are possible, then who have I been refusing to allow through the door that could do this because I assume things about them? Who out there could be the next commissioner or the next secretary or the next governor that I've been self-selecting out for their own good because people like that really can't pull it. And so I try to be unabashed when I let people know that I am a GED student and more.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.